Okay, this is an excellent presentation today. I'll give you all the tips and tricks. I just passed this exam. This is my second time. I had to recertify, and so I thought it was a lot more difficult the second time.
Well, you said that about the professional
Yeah.
architect exam too. Trying to remember, was for me, did I think the professional architect exam was more was harder the second time? I don't know. Maybe I just forgot how well the first one was.
Well, what it is, Amazon used to give you 2 years and you had to recertify, but they
Right.
extended it to 3. Well, 3 years in cloud time is like what, 30? Because
Yeah.
at that time there's so many more services and everything's interacting, and
Right.
there
Right.
there are a few changes to the services since I came on. For example, AWS config didn't do IAM. So if there was change in IAM, AWS config didn't see it, but now, and it's pretty amazing, AWS config sees changes in IAM. Can you believe
Yeah.
that?
It should. It should.
That's
It should,
powerful.
based
That's
upon what
powerful
it's
though.
trying to do.
Yeah. If you're looking for the links to this presentation today, is right there. Just posted it
Happy
in
to
the
be
chat.
here.
We have got a lot of people. I don't know if I'm going to get to everyone. Forgive me if I don't, but I want to go ahead and get started, or we won't ever get through all the material. So I'm going to get started. And if I didn't get to you, I'm sorry. It's not intentional. It's just we got a lot of material and I want to move forward with it. And the icebreakers are a little longer today because I want to kind of use some AI today in the icebreaker. So I think you'll enjoy that. With that said, who am I? My name is Mike Lively. I started this group about a year and a half ago. I had run a meetup before, and so the pandemic hit, and we were supposed to come back to work, and we didn't. I was disappointed. My wife just looked at me and said, "You've got to do something different." So I started this meetup about a year and a half ago. At that point, I had 8 cloud certifications. I thought, well, I could help people get cloud certifications, and now I have like 22 certifications and counting. So it just shows you when you go to try to help someone or bless someone, you get double blessed yourself. And I have certifications in AWS, Azure, Google, Terraform, etc. And now, just this month, I got my certified Microsoft trainer. Woohoo! That's kind of what I do for a business. I mean, in my work, I work for a Fortune 500 company in the Cincinnati area. I started off about 11 and a half years ago as a front-end and .NET developer, and then I became a DevOps tech lead. Then I became a QA architect, and then they had me doing some training for them, and they liked it so much they bumped me up to manager of training and documentation. Previously, I held jobs in the government, education, and military. All right. With that said, we have a bunch of events coming up, which I'm excited about. Bring this down a little bit. Today, of course, acing the AWS Security Specialty exam. Like I said, I just took it this week. I finished an hour early, and but there's a lot of stuff about the exam I want to talk about. A lot of tricks for taking this particular exam. Next week, algorithmic trading, Python, and Bitcoin. So we'll see that on the 10th. Then on January 21st, so we're going to go becoming an Azure Solutions Architect, acing the AZ 305. A lot of people have asked me to do the Solutions Architect. We have a volunteer to do an AWS Solutions Architect Associate coming up in early February. Excited about that. The details, we're still working those out, and I'll get those posted soon. Data engineering on Microsoft Azure, DP 201, and and when I was the QA architect, I worked in data, so I'm actually excited about doing that particular one. Acing the Azure AZ 500 exam. Gonna do become a Google Professional Cloud Architect, and the 25th of March, and then finally preparing for the DevOps interview. So how to interview for the DevOps position and what types of things you need to know and say. And there's a lot of DevOps positions out there, and this may help you get job prep for one of those. Okay. With that said, in today's presentation, we're going to do Mike's standard intro, an icebreaker, overview of the exam, study tips and study plan, Amazon study resources, and 5 domains and questions. So there's 5 domains to this test. We're going to go through all of them, and we're going to look at sample questions. All right, that's a lot to do. Let's start right into the introduction. My standard intro, what I always say every time we're right in the middle of a paradigm shift, our technology DNA is rapidly changing. Cloud technology is transforming how businesses create value, how people work, and ultimately how people live. But now how we think, and I just got this one, and who does the thinking? And I'm worried that as this progresses, it might be what we think. AI is getting smarter all the time. And the way we did coding yesterday, oh boy, is not going to last very much longer. And it's like the correspondence to this is like many years ago when women were hand stitching in these huge factories. And these guys are standing there going, I don't think a machine could ever do what these ladies do. Next thing you know, They shut down the shop, fire all the employees. I've seen this happen in IT, and they've got 10 sewing machines going on in the back. The same thing's going to happen with coding. And it's here, and it has come in the come as what we call Get GPT-3. And what Microsoft has done is taken its GitHub and a few other resources and ran it through the neural net. And now when you type in Python or in a number of other codes and just tell it what you want, it writes the code for you automatically. And we'll see this next week. I'll actually demo this to you next week so you can see it happen. But we are going to have a demo kind of this using the GPT-3 engine today. In comparison to the old engines before, you can see GPT is really up there with 175 billion parameters. And then GPT-3, and then 4 is going to have more. With that said, let's move on. I'll go ahead. So today we're gonna show you how I actually use this in my job today. And we're gonna start off with an icebreaker to show you how this works. So if you could write a famous screenplay, what would be your storyline? So let's think about that for a second. I don't know if you guys have a lot of experience in a screenplay writing. I actually have a cheat sheet for this one, just in case. But does anyone have a burning story, a burning screenplay that they would like to write? And it's automatically it's going to be famous. So you don't have to worry about becoming famous. Just what would be your story? What's your storyline?
The day in a life of a security specialist.
The day in the life of a security specialist. I like that. That's not
Oh,
bad.
please don't.
Someone says, please, that is my life. That's a nightmare.
Please don't.
Okay, so what's your story?
It's going to be a horror play.
Oh, wait, now that was good. That's actually on the list. It's actually on the list of, if you go to the next slide and you get your little help slide here, you could be choosing your genre. So what's your genre? Action, drama, science fiction, horror. You said horror, right? Okay, great. All right, let's get another one. Does anyone else have their screenplay that they'd like to, they've just been burning their story they want to tell? I mean, that's
I
a
got
good
one.
Go ahead.
Okay, it's I've often thought about setting would be people graduating out of high school and they've got to make career decisions. And with technology and how much life is changing so much, I mean, the job that they end up working will probably not even exist at the time, and how they prepare for it, how some people who don't prepare for it end up in great jobs, and those who prepare very hard in an overpopulated area, and how much your life directions end up being a little stochastic.
Yeah, I think that's the story of technology, right? I mean,
Hey, Mike, you've got
yeah.
a couple people in chat.
Okay.
Zahid said, young
Okay.
guy from the rough side of town hits the lotto and buys stock in Tesla. And
Okay.
Zoe said, life and day in agile.
Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I mean, I had to be checking my chat. All right, so I got 3 good ones. Does anyone have a preference? We got actually 4 here. This is good. Does anyone have a preference on which one you want to do? Day in the life of security specialist would be a horror film. Graduating out of high school and not, and preparing for a job that's not there, and how does that take you? Or young guy from the rough side of town hits the lotto and buys stock in Tesla. What do you think? Which one? I'm actually thinking about this one. I really like this one, Zahid. Guys, do you mind if I go with this one?
That's fine.
Okay, excellent. Okay, let's start using some AI to kind of work this out. Now, if you want to know about stories, there's Dan Harmon's Story Circle. This is how we use stories in building basically courses and weaving those stories in. And here's some of the technologies that you can use to help you, build a story using AI. So we'll go to Labs Open AI and we'll start by creating an image. So let's do that. And these images are open to the public because they're created by AI. So it's not pulling from a stock set of images. They're actually being pulled from AI, from their multidimensional space. So this is DALL-E. And we'll put this in here. Let's see if we can get anything. If I just put that in there, let's see if DALL-E can generate an image just from that description, okay? Let's go here. I'm just going to put this description here and see if DALL-E can come up with the image. Just kind of give you just some inspiration. So I'll just put it in there and see what kind of image it generates. There you go. Here you go. What you think? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Which ones it would be the image that you would go with?
You got more images on the right. This is just the first 4.
Yeah, I know. Actually, some of these I actually generated from other things I was looking at. So these are the ones for this one. You like these, or what do you want to change this? We'll just say, here we go. This looks like a good one, right? This guy's just riding high. He's a rough guy from the other side of town, and he's got a money to buy stock. There you go. He's gonna make more with it. So I like this. These are if you know about image processing, if you get more detailed, or how you say it is going to generate images that you look for. So that's the first start. So now let's write a screenplay. So we're going to go next to our, see, we got a little image there to get us started thinking about concepts, and now we're going to write a screenplay. Let's do that. Matter of fact, we're not going to write it. We're going to let the AI write it for us. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, well, this is a screenplay. Play and it's and it is about this in here. Oh, let me go get the title there. Okay, let's see what the AI comes up with. The story follows a young man from a poor, rough neighborhood who unexpectedly hits the lottery and decides to use his newfound wealth to invest in Tesla stock. He is initially hesitant to invest in the company, being unfamiliar with the stock market and unsure of what to expect, but eventually takes the plunge and purchases the stock. As the months and years go by, he watches his investments grow and his net worth increased, leading him to become more successful and a confident investor. Along the way, he makes new friends and finds himself in new opportunities that he never dreamed would be possible for him. In the end, the game pays off, and he comes out as a more secure finance. Okay, now let's take the end away, and let's see if we can do something else. So what would you like to add to that? Someone give me the next story thing. So he never dreamed this would be possible. What happens next?
He meets a girl.
Okay, he meets a girl. That's okay. Let's see what happens next. He meets a girl. They eventually fall in love and get married. He is able to provide her with a comfortable life, and they live happily ever after. The story ends with the young man reflecting on the events of his life, realizing that his success was only possible because of his willingness to take a risk. He is thankful for his life. So let's say he meets a girl and falls in love. Okay, let's add to this, but she doesn't love him.
And runs away with his best friend.
Do you want? I hit the submit. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. We can put that in there. The story takes a twist when the young man discovers that his wife, who he thought loved him, was only with him for the money. Heartbroken and betrayed, he quickly withdraws his investment from Tesla and uses the money to create a charitable foundation. So anyway, let's see, and runs away. I'm sorry, and I'm gonna have to let it go for you. Let's do this. I'm gonna get rid of that, all that stuff before, and put this in instead.
You need to say away, I think.
Huh? And runs away. There you go. Let's get rid of this and try this. All right, let's try it again. See what else. He's devastated and his life unravels. He has lost his newfound wealth, and he is left in a state of despair. He eventually bounces back by reconnecting with his old neighborhood friends and getting back on his feet. With this support, he learns to accept his losses and move on with his life. So there you go. You know, and you can play around with it, and it can give you ideas, and you can write stories, and this is getting better. And what happens is the AI is watching me. And so as I begin to work with this and write my own stories, it's adding it to the AI and getting smarter all the time. So I wanted to show that as an icebreaker today, so you guys can get an idea what kind of technology is out there. But we're going to do the exact same thing next week, but not with words, but with coding. So we're going to type in like, hey, I want this, and GitHub Copilot's going to give us back the code. So I look forward to seeing that next week. That's the icebreaker. I hope you like that. First time I ever did an AI icebreaker, so I thought I'd take the chance. All right, with that said, let's talk about the exam. All right. In this particular exam, if you ever looked at AWS certifications, there's like a tree of certifications that you can take, and they actually are adding to them all the time. But you start off typically with the cloud practitioner, and you have a choice to do the architect, operations, and developer. And you might even go security. Now, I think the security exam, however, is a little hefty, and definitely more hefty than it was in the past. I have typically in some of these done cloud practitioner and then just went to security. And the reason I've done that is that many times about 20% of these exams are security. So if you get the security on your belt, you don't have to worry about that when you're studying for these exams. In this case, I would definitely do the architect or developer or operations, and then do the security before you do the professional licenses, because that will round you out really well. Number of reasons why you want to do the security exam. Once again, 20% is on the associate level, but also it's very practical. There's tons of stuff that you're going to learn and you're actually going to use in real day life. And we'll see a question on that here in a moment. So let me move on. And where you find that important is some of those concepts that you want to be aware of when it comes to security is the responsibility model, and we've all heard about it. And so you've heard, I'm sure you've heard both ways. The cloud isn't secure. The cloud is more secure than my data center. And so in all honesty, the cloud is not secure unless, right? Right? Unless you do the right thing. And what I mean by that, if you put a really easy root password in there and someone guesses your root password or gets your root password, then they have your whole business. And if they take over your data, then of course you're responsible for the data. AWS is responsible for the infrastructure, right? And so if you put your data in there and you haven't protected it properly, then you can lose your data. You lose your whole business. And you may run to AWS and say, please help me get out of this. They can't do anything about it. They can't access your system. Only your root can. So you really want to make sure that you protect that root password. And so here's a question that you might see on the exam. So we're going to dive into a lot of questions today. We're going to look at a lot of questions, okay? So here's the first question that you might see on the exam is, while analyzing a company's security solution, a security architect wants to secure the AWS account root user. What should the security engineer do to provide the highest level of security for the account? So let's look at A, B, C, and D. Take a look at those real quick and see if you guys can come up with an answer. And I'm going to get right into questions right away. And this is a typical question.
D.
D. It says, create a new user that has administrative permissions in the AWS account. Enable multi-factor authentication for the AWS user account. Yes, I would say that's correct. In addition, there's a few other things you might see on the exam. Plus, delete keys. Don't let that root user have keys. Tighten the password. And this, I love this one. It's like, take this root password, write it on a piece of paper, and lock it in a safe, right? And also you want to make sure you monitor user usage. And guys, make sure you set your billing alarm. Okay, that will save you on all your different systems. That will save you your life. Let me tell you. This particular exam, you're going to see a few things. First of all, it's not required that you have any experience to take it. The exam is good for 3 years. It is $300 unless you passed an exam. So if you've passed a previous AWS exam, you get a voucher that's $150 off. So make sure you use those vouchers. The exam is 170 minutes. There are 65 questions, and passing is 75%. Okay. They suggest you have 5 years experience, but you don't need to. And the exam format is multiple choice and multiple select. So if you're taking a AWS exam, this is what you're doing. It's just multiple select, or single select. If you're doing an Azure exam, you're actually doing labs. So make sure you know the difference when you go in to do those exams. Okay. With that said, there are 5 domains to this exam. The incident response is 12%, login monitoring is 20%, infrastructure security is 26%, identity and access management is 20%, and data protection is 22%. Okay. All right, with that said, I actually have a study plan for this exam that I'm going to tell you, if you go through this study plan, you will most likely pass this exam. Okay. And let me move this down just a little bit. Okay. And I have all the links in the slides. So if you have the slides, go make sure you have access to all these links. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to do the exam readiness, AWS readiness exam. And so AWS has a series of courses that it provides to you for free. And I'm going to give you links to those. And actually the link to it is right here, Certified Security, and we're going to look at it real quick. And then the next one is on Udemy. Chandra Lengam has an excellent course. And if you go through that course, you're going to learn a lot about security. He also has a lot of labs that he does along with the course. So you can follow those labs as well. In addition, Azil Vora has a nice review. So if you register for his course, at the end, there's a review that you can go through where he goes through every single concept, and he has a series of exams that you can take that are similar to the exam itself. Finally, free on the web is Quizlets. So every once in a while, I will look at Quizlets, and the link is there as well. And Quizlets actually just has a whole series of flashcards you can go through and look at questions that might be like on the exam. And some of them are very similar to exam questions. Finally, you can go at the end of it and take the AWS readiness exam. I did that. I knew 19 out of 20. However, I got to tell you, this was nothing like the exam. These questions were very easy, where I think the exam questions were a little bit more challenging. Now, if you want to do more labs, then there's always Whiz Labs, okay? And that's an option. So if you just don't want to come out and be a paper dragon, or you don't want to, you want to watch out about actually using your own personal account for doing labs, you can pay for Whiz Labs and do Whiz Labs. On all of these services, guys, let me warn you, or encourage you to wait for the deals. All these sites are always running deals. Let me bring this down just a little bit. So Udemy, you can go on Udemy and the course can be $100, and you go next week, the course is $10, right? And then with WizLabs, they're always running deals. So, and sometimes if you just need it for a month, you can buy it for a month. And so, but let's take a look at, let me see which one of these I'd like to look at. And I don't want to get too involved with this. We're going to take a look at the exam readiness here in a moment. Good. One thing I want to tell you about this exam right away for you guys that are thinking about taking this exam, there are many choose 2 out of 3 questions. All right. About 80% of exam is to choose 2 out of 3. However, what's really great about the exam, every single one of these that were 2 out of 3 had similar questions where you just need to pick one from the other. And I'm going to give you an example of what that looks like in a moment. But first, let me give you my study tips for passing this exam. Here we go. Bring this resolution down just a little bit. I'm too high. Number 1, when you take these exams, scan the answers first. I always read the answers first. See if you can visualize the architecture pattern being described. Sometimes you can just read the answer and identify the correct or complete architectural pattern and not even read the question. Now, I'm not officially recommending that you do that, but I have, in some cases, and specifically this exam, I spent 5 seconds on some questions because I read the answers. I knew that's it. Boom, I clicked it and went on to the next one. That gives me more time to work on the harder questions. All right, so just be aware of that. So architecture patterns can easily be identified with 1 or 2 keywords or phrases. If you see these keywords in a question, you will know the architectural pattern associated with them. Then you can just answer the question rapidly. I typically finish my exams 1 hour early by scanning the answers for keywords. And about 20% of this particular exam was just keywords. It was really easy to figure them out and then just move to the next one. The rest of it was like really trying to compare different answers with other answers, and I'll show you how that goes. Now, I got to tell you, one of the things I pray about when I come to an exam that I don't get a hard question at the very beginning because I get nervous, right? And then I have to calm down a little bit. Okay, it's not going to be like this. And then I move on and I get some easy questions. My confidence builds. Also, when you come to a hard question, don't spend a million hours on it, right? Because, easy questions count the same as hard questions. So if you spend like 20 minutes on a question and you don't have a chance to finish all the questions on the exam, you're going to miss a lot of things you might have gotten. In addition, what I try to do when I get a hard question, I try to get it down to 50-50. And I mark that question for review and then I move on. So what I do, I get it down to 50-50. I choose one, I answer one of them. I choose an answer and I write it down on my paper, which one I need to go back and review. So at the end, I can go back and look at it. If I get to the end of the exam and I have like 14 50-50s, I might not even check them, because I know that out of that 14 50-50, I got half of those because it's 50-50. And then I only missed 7. So I got a pretty good score on that exam. I just submit. So that's how you kind of want to play that game, but don't get stuck on a question. Get it down to 50-50, answer it, mark it for review, move on. Okay. With that said, that's my tips and tricks, but however, I want to give you some real live examples here. So let's take a look at some. Here's an example of what you might see where you get multiple select, and here's select 2. If you look at this question, immediately you know this begins with database, this begins with database, this begins with application, this begins with application, this begins with application. What does that tell me? That tells me that one of these databases is going to be correct. That's 1. And one out of these 3 applications is going to be correct. That's 2. That's my 2 answers. So as opposed to reading this as is correct or not, reading that is it correct or not, reading this is not correct or not, just group them into logical selection groups and then work on those 2 individually. So kind of divide and conquer. So let's take a look at this question and see if we can figure out which one is right. An application is unable to connect to a database, listening on port 3306. The application and database security groups allow all inbound and outbound traffic. What is the most secure configuration to correct this problem? So let's look at the A, and I kind of read them together. This is the same. This is all the same. So what's the difference between these? Well, rule must allow traffic on port 336. Outbound rule must allow traffic on ephemeral ports. What do you think? A or D? Which one's the correct answer?
It's got to go after an ephemeral port.
Yeah, it's got to go out of the ephemeral pool. So it's D. So immediately, and that's how this whole exam is when it comes to these 2s and 3s. It's a little extra added to something, and oh, which one's right? Okay. Let's look at the next one. Application sub. It all says application subnet. It all says outbound rule must allow traffic to 3006. This is the subnet ACL. And inbound rule must allow traffic to port 3000. Here's the next one. Inbound rule must allow traffic to 3006, and outbound rule must allow traffic to on a ephemeral port. Assuming that's
You're reading
Yeah,
it
sorry.
wrong.
Let's go to E. Application NACL outbound must allow traffic to port 336, and inbound rule must allow traffic to ephemeral port. What do you think? Which one?
I'd say it's E.
All right.
I
You
think
yeah,
somebody in the chat also said the same thing.
excellent. And you are correct. The answers are
Sven said
database.
that.
Actually, good job. And so do you guys see what I'm talking about? And this is pretty much the whole exam was like this when it comes to, the 80% there, that was pretty much choose 2 and 3. There were questions like this where I have 2 answers. I can group these into a set of 1, and I can group these in a set of the other. It's just kind of divide and conquer when you hit these type of questions. Okay. All right. And if you want to read more about this, go to the notes, and you can see there's an explanation why this is correct. Okay. All right, let's move on. All right, here was one that had 3, and this was pretty much an example of knowing a sequence. And I didn't see a whole lot of those on these exams. So we'll go ahead and skip over this one and go to the next part of the material. And this is what the training that Amazon provides for this particular certificate. So let's go ahead and go right to the link, and we'll take a look at it. So Amazon is providing training. They started doing this a number of years ago. And if you go down here to their training, you can see you can get basically the guide on what's on the exam. You can get the original security sample questions. Actually, believe it or not, there are 2 or 3 from these original security questions that actually like that appeared on the exam. Next, there is a security official practice exam. You used to pay for this, and Amazon is now giving it away for free. However, I found it not very useful. And finally, there's the exam readiness course, which I thought was really good. I learned a lot, but even after taking this exam, you're not ready for the test, not even close. But it has a lot of good information in it. As a matter of fact, I used a lot of their slides in this presentation, so I'll let you know that. So be aware that that is out there. I am highly suggesting that you do all 3, and as you prep for this exam. Okay, I want to show you an example of using keywords because I mentioned that in Mike's tips. And this is an example of a question that I found one like this on the exam, and I spent 5 seconds on it. Okay, and so we're going to go ahead and just read the question, and I'll let you look at it and see if you see any keywords that jump out at you. A corporate cloud security policy states that communications between the company's VPC and KMS must travel entirely through the AWS network and not use public service endpoints. Which combination of the following actions most satisfies this requirement? What do you think? A, B, C, or D? Now there's an architectural pattern here and I knew it. So I immediately just looked at the keywords and I tell you, I spent 5 seconds on this question.
Zahid says C.
Well, and that's one of them. Okay, there's two, but that is one of them. The reason that is the way it used to be is if you wanted to access a service, for example, an S3 bucket, you used to have to go outside, go to a public link that went into the cloud and you actually could access it through there. Now you can actually create these private links, right? Or these endpoints that allow you to go across the AWS infrastructure. And so yes, C is one of them. Anybody have an idea what the other one is?
Guess B.
It's not B, but it's A, AWS Source VPC. I just saw that word. I said, that's it. And I saw endpoint, that's it. And I was done. And so I'll show you what I did. So there you go. I saw AWS Source VPC and I saw VPC endpoint and I was done. Because what the VPC source does, it keeps you from locks you down to that particular VPC. And you can read more about the question. It actually is, there's Sandra actually did a video of all the answers to the, of all the questions and answers of the AWS questions that they give out to you for free. And you can actually watch that on YouTube right here below in this link. Okay, now let me talk about comparing config files. Typically when I take an exam like this, like an AWS exam, I see 1 or 2 config file comparisons. This exam had about 5 or 6 config file comparisons. And so you want to make sure that you're good at doing config file comparisons. I actually, I used to be a developer, and so I love these. I go, yay! I mean, because I look at them and, my mind is thinking develop it. But there is one little rule of thumb I'll give you guys. If you don't know the answer at all, and only use this technique if you don't know the answer at all, all right? If you don't know the answer at all, choose the one in the middle. So you can see if you look at B, C, and D, they actually increase in what you need. B has too little. D has too much. So C's the answer. I know that's really cheesy, but I'm just saying, if you come to a question and you don't even have a clue, you can still do comparison in your mind. And oh, well, I can see the action is that here's the most action you can have. I'm throwing out A because that's all action. But here's the most action I can have. Here's the least. So let's just choose the one in the middle. I found that to work. And I'm really good at config problems. So you will have to get good at config problems to pass this test. Like I said, there's 5 or 6 of them on there. With that, you can actually, if you want to get more hands-on with labs, Wiz Labs has 15 labs in this for AWS for this exam. 2 or 3 of them, they're kind of a must do. With that said, let me just talk about some more of the introductory concepts. In this exam, you really do need to know about in-transit encryption and at-rest encryption. So sometimes they'll try to, I saw some trick questions like, they try to say, well, we're going to use KMS for in-transit. And you don't ever use KMS for in-transit. Use KMS for server-side, right? So just be aware of when you use different security practices. So here's a nice question for encryption. A company is building a data lake on Amazon S3. The data consists of millions of small files containing sensitive information. The security team has the following requirements for the architecture. Data must be encrypted in transit. Data must be encrypted at rest. The bucket must be private, but if the bucket is accidentally made public, the data must remain confidential. Which combination of steps would meet these requirements? What do you think? Take a look at this real quick and see if you can come up with an idea. Let's see if anyone put anything in the chat.
Well, I'd throw out E because it doesn't have to do with the question.
Right.
I mean,
Macy is a technology that helps you with PII data. So when you have
Right.
that protected data, you use Macy. So if you ever see, PII in the question and you see Macy in the answer, just hit Macy and move on. You got the answer. Okay. So that you're right. E's out.
C sounds good.
Yep. As soon as I see secure transport, I'm going, yep, because you can't do a put object unless it's secure transport. So it's not going in unless it's been encoded. Yes. So you're right. C is correct. So that's what I saw that as a keyword. So you're down here to A and B. What's wrong with A? It's encrypted automatically, but when you retrieve it, it unencrypts.
Right.
Yeah. So A's
Oh
out.
yeah. Right. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
A's out. So it's B. You're going to use the KMS managed key. So I saw KMS and I saw secure transport and boom, I was done. And this is another one type that I spent like 5 seconds on, excuse me. Now, when it comes to security, let's hit with another introductory concept here. You may build a system like you got an elastic load balancer and you got some instances like EC2 instances behind it. Yeah, that's really nice. But what you want to do, you want to harden that instance, and then so you want to be aware of all the various services that allow you to do that. And so when you use Amazon Inspector, you're going to look at those common vulnerabilities or exposures, right? So you need that running on your system. So you're looking at your CVE. So whenever you see in a question CVE, immediately think Amazon Inspector, because that's what that is. Here's you got your key management here with your KMS, and you got your SNS topics. Now what SNS topics does, it's a pub sub. So what you do is you subscribe to it, and when anything happens, it publishes to you. So immediately, if there's a CVE problem, immediately get a SNS topic that sends you an email saying, hey, there's an issue here. AWS config is your workhorse for configuration. So if there's a configuration change in your system, AWS config picks it up. However, AWS config is not real time. Okay. So if you start hearing real time, think Event Bridge, think Kinesis. Either one is going to be a choice in the question. AWS RAF is really workhorse for putting those rules in and watching what's coming in through the web. So that's your web application firewall. You really need that. You're going to use it a lot. AWS Shield is a really interesting one. If you're having DDoS attack, you're going to need AWS Shield. However, there's a free version and there's a paid version. How much do you think the paid version costs?
$1,000 a month, I think.
$3,000 a month. However, if you just have one, it's not what?
I don't remember.
It's not available, right? It's not highly available. It's not, it's not
Oh, right.
resilient. You
Yeah.
need two. So if you're going to use AWS Advanced, you're going to, Advanced Shield, you're paying $6,000 a month just to have two of those in case one goes down, right? AWS Certificate Manager is wonderful. That manages all your certificates for you automatically. So there you're going to do. So if you're going to actually, and you're going to need your S3 buckets to be writing things into, and you're going to put CloudFront in front of this because it also helps you with a lot of the security issues that are coming in. And then you're going to make sure you pretty much, in a sense, harden the system by putting all these different things on it. And in that hardening, you need to understand how each one of these interact. So a lot of the questions is going to be, which one of these do you use and when? And so be aware of that and be aware of how these architectures fit together. With that said, here's a question that actually, this is one you've probably seen, Charles, because we actually had this one on the advanced AWS professional architect exam. And when I looked at this once again, you can see, and I just want to show it for illustration. Whenever you see CVE assessment, you immediately know it's going to be Amazon Inspector. So this is how keywords will help you out. So about 20% exam, this particular exam, you could use keywords, but then the rest exam was either configuration comparison or most of it was choose 2 or 3. We're actually comparing 2 or 3 answers together. So that's pretty much the way the exam is, how it's structured, the type of questions that were on it, and what you need to put your emphasis on. With that said, we're going to go through and we're actually going to look at some actual questions, okay? And we're going to actually take a break too as well. Let me see if it's break time. Yeah, we're headed toward a 5-minute break. And when we come back from a 5-minute break, we're going to go through each domain. We're going to talk about what's in that domain, give you some of the basic concepts, and we're going to look at specific questions for each domain, okay? So let me go ahead and put a 5 minutes on the clock so we can all take a bio break, and then we'll come back in 5 minutes, and we'll start going through each one of these domains and looking at different types of questions that will be in these domains. Okay?
I have a question, but I can also wait until after the break.
No, go ahead and answer it now. We got time.
I posted in the chat, I don't have a lot of in-depth AWS experience, just basically, say the cloud practitioner.
Yeah.
And would you recommend to do the solutions architect associate first before I do the specialty?
I would do this before I took this exam. See, I took this exam 3 years ago, and I always suggest people to do the security next. But after I took this new one, I thought it was fairly stiff, very difficult. So I would go on and do an associate exams next, and then I would do the security before you did the professional.
See, I don't want to walk into it and get obliterated.
Yeah, in this particular exam, there's a lot of architecture. Okay, and that's what's
yeah.
changed in the exam. I mean, the last time I took the exam 3 years ago, everything was AWS config because that was their newest service, and every answer was almost every answer. But in this new exam, it was pretty architectural stiff. So I would go on and do an associate of some type, and then go to the security. Yeah, if you're a security architect, I would follow the architect roadmap. I would go take the solutions architect. And I don't think it's any less difficult than, or even any more difficult than sysops. Okay. I would do the solutions and then I'd go to the security.
Yeah, okay, so the associate, the solutions architect associate, and then the security specialty.
Yeah. And the reason I'm
Okay.
saying that is because the security, especially now, is a lot more stiffer in architect
Right, yeah.
architecture. So
I
you're
get
going to
that.
really need to know a lot of the architects of the system to get that,
Okay.
get that piece, because it's a lot. Previously it wasn't, but things have changed in 3 years.
Mm,
So I had, in the past, I put it down here with this, go here to here, but now I'm actually putting it up above it because it's so stiff in architecture now.
okay, all right, cool, thank
Good.
you.
No, great question. Thanks for asking. I got to go back and review that. Thank you so much. All right, let me go back to where I was so I don't lose my spot. And then I'm gonna put the 5-minute on there and I'll see you guys in 5 minutes. Let me bring that back up. Okay, we are back. And if you're looking for the link to the presentation, I just put it in the chat again. So feel free to download that. It is coming from my S3 bucket on Amazon. Okay, with that said, we're going to look at there's 5 domain areas, and we're going to look at incident response, logging and monitoring, infrastructure, security, identity and access management, data protection. So we're going to hit like some main concepts, and then we'll probably do 2 questions for each area so you can get an idea of the kind of questions that are on the exam. Okay, but before we do that, are there any more questions before we move on? Okay, so I'll go ahead and get started. All right, incident response. So there's a few important concepts here, and a lot of them are surrounding services that you need to know how they work and fit together and what they do. AWS Trusted Advisor, where you might want to know service limits. AWS Cloud Formation actually builds infrastructure for you, kind of like Terraform. AWS Service Catalog, if you want a catalog of services that people can use. I did not see one single question like this on the test, but your test may be different, so you may see one. VPC flow logs, if you want to understand, how your security groups and NACLs are working. However, be aware VPC flow logs do not inspect packets. So if you get a question to inspect packets, you're going to need a third party to proxy things through. AWS config is basically your workhorse for configuration comparison. AWS API gateway basically is how you build APIs. AWS Cloud Trail. Now here's an important one, just for APIs. AWS CloudWatch is for metrics. So make sure you know the difference between the two. Many times what happens is you have a server that's been attacked, right? And you want to pull it out of the system. So basically you try to isolate it and do forensic work on it. I think one of the things they try to trick you is they go like on the test, like you have a server that's gone bad, do you shut it down? And that's the one thing you don't want to do, because you can't get information from it. You can't find out about what happened. You can't trace. You may have a EBS attached to it. And if that happens, you lose your block storage. And so there's lots of things you don't want to do. And one is not shut it down. You want to isolate it. Okay. With that said, on the particular area of instance response, you might see evaluate the suspected compromised instance or expose excess keys given an AWS abuse notice. Verify that the incident response plan includes relevant AWS services. Evaluate the configuration of automated alerting and execute possible remediation of security related incidents and emerging issues. So you get questions like this. Let's take a look at one. So here we go. An employee accidentally exposed an AWS access key and secret access key during a public presentation. Has that ever happened? The company security engineer immediately disabled the key. How can the engineer access the impact of the key exposure and ensure that the credentials were not misused? So which 2 of those would you choose? A, B, C, D, or E?
Well, there's 2, and I would choose Cloud Trail.
That's correct, because you got this, it's going to track all API usage and everything's driven by API. That's correct. A is correct.
And the IAM use report from Trusted Advisor, C.
Actually, it's actually download and analyze the credential report.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so Trusted Advisor is not going to deal with that.
Oh, yeah, Trusted Advisor. That's
Yeah,
different.
absolutely. And no, but that really illustrates, Charles, really having nailed in your mind what each one of these services do, and even some of the nuances. But yeah, you want this credentials report so you can know who has that key, and then you can potentially project how it was used. But Good try. Good try. I got the first one. Now on Amazon, if you get one of them right, do you get the question right? You don't.
Oh, you don't. Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
and
it's
and
all right.
and that's what's challenging about the exam. And as I was going through it, I was like going, oh my goodness, because a lot of it was choose 2 and 3, right? So if you're choosing 2 and 3 and you get one of them wrong, you get the whole question wrong. So if about
Right.
80% exam choose 2 or 3, you need to make sure you do a good job of comparing. All right. With that said, that is correct. And let's go to the next one. A security engineer must design a solution that enables the incident response team to audit for changes to a user's IMA permission in the case of a security incident. How can this be accomplished? You need to audit changes that were made to a user's IAM permission. And this has been a change to one of the services that it just has made it extremely powerful. A, B, C, or D. Is it AWS config? Is it run
And-
generate credential report? Is it AWS CloudFormation? You know that's wrong because
Well,
CloudFormation does what? It creates things.
Well,
Or is
you
it
were saying earlier that config now supports IAM.
absolutely? I set you up for this question, right? So
Yep.
it's A, and that makes config extremely powerful. And now you can watch the IAM policy. Yeah, changes. That's pretty cool. All right, that's 2 for that. Let's skip and skip on. Let's move forward, and let's look at logging and monitoring. Okay. This is 20% of the exam. And some of the key concepts here are, there's 3 right away. I talked about them already. When you see CloudWatch, think metrics. When you see AWS config, think config state. When you see AWS CloudTrail, think APIs. And if you keep that straight in your mind, it's really going to go a long way. Okay. Next, Event Bridge is something that's new. We've seen this come along the last couple of years. And Event Bridge is CloudWatch on steroids. And what it allows you to do is create rules, and when events fire, these rules pick it up and it will send it to a Lambda or other devices. But what's cool about Event Bridge is it pretty much is close to real time, okay? Where AWS config is not. And so many times when you're dealing with a security, am I interested in real time or just whenever I can get it? I would say I want real time, right? Yeah, when I'm doing security, I want as much as I can. If there's been an incident, if someone's come into my system, if one of my keys has
Right.
been compromised, I want real time. One of the other things you'll see, of course, is Amazon Athena, and this seems to be the stock question in all the time on a lot of the Amazon exams. They're just very proud of the service, right? So if you're have an S3 bucket and you need to do some SQL on it, search it where you couldn't in the past, you can now using Amazon Athena. All right, with that said, on this particular part of the exam, you can have design and implement security monitoring and alerting, troubleshooting security monitoring and alerting, designing and implementing a logging solution, and troubleshooting logging solutions. Let's take a look at some potential questions. An application outputs logs to a text file. The logs must continuously monitor for security incidents. Which design will meet the requirements with minimal effort? Pretty much a stock question you might find on the exam. So read through theirs and see if you can figure out what the answer might be.
I'd say B.
And you would be correct. Install and configure the Amazon CloudWatch Logs agent on the application's E2 instance. Okay, so you got to make sure the agent is installed. Create a CloudWatch metrics. That's what CloudWatch does. It has metrics to monitor application logs. All right, set up the CloudWatch alerts based on the metrics. So there you go. That's a full solution. And when you see that, you want to make sure that you can understand why each of the other solutions are wrong. But if you have a strong idea of what the architecture will be, you'll go, yeah, that one's right. I'm also looking at S3, but that one didn't work. So that is the correct one. Right. Now, let me just say why I eliminated A and C. Whenever I see create a scheduled, I immediately think, that's wrong. And I throw those 2 answers out. So I now got a selection between B and D. Okay. Why would I throw create a scheduled process out immediately? Anybody have an idea?
Well, because it's, first of all, it's not real time, so it's not
Right.
continuously monitored.
Right.
And
Right.
secondly,
Right.
you're creating, it's more work. It says the minimum effort
Yep.
So,
Yeah,
so you
absolutely.
gotta go
Absolutely.
create something.
Right. So many times in security, you don't want to wait for the answer, right? So if you see, and you'll see lots of answers like, go and query this every 24 hours, and get the and it works, but you only get the data every 24 hours. Well, 24 hours in security is a lifetime, right? You, you could have had so much data compromised. So you don't want to. So I'm not saying create schedule is always the wrong answer, but many times when I see create a schedule or wait or some type of process that takes a period of time, especially when I want something real time, I immediately throw it out. Okay. It's another tip for passing the exam. Okay, that's one. Let's try another one. And this one's, you get tired of reading after a while, and you will on this exam. It's a little bit of an endurance exam. Let's skip over this one since it's a long one. Let's take the next one. Okay, a software engineer wrote a customized reporting service that will run on a fleet of EC2 instances. The company's security policy states that the application logs for the reporting service must be centrally collected. What is the most efficient way to meet these requirements? Okay, take a look at this, and I'll let you see if you can come up with an answer.
I'd say D.
It's pretty much like the other question, right? And you're right on that one. Install an Amazon CloudWatch agent on the EC2 instance. Remember, you got to install that agent and configure it to send application logs to CloudWatch logs. Now, that's not the only place to send logs to. So many times you'll see questions where you're sending logs to an S3 bucket. So you got to, and if you have two of those, you have to decide, well, is it going to be CloudWatch or it's going to be the S3 bucket option? You don't have that here in a sense. Here's one. It looks like enable AWS CloudTrail, but that's CloudTrail. I'm looking for CloudWatch. See. All right. With that said, let's move on. I think that we can move on to the next set. There you go. Next one is infrastructure security. Now, before I start this one, are there any questions so far? Let me ask you, is this helping you guys when you approach one of these exams next time? Do you think you've learned anything that might help?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, and it took me a long time to learn this, but I use these rules, and I'm finishing an hour early, and I'm not necessarily a good exam taker. You're getting some good tips here. So let me go ahead and take a look at infrastructure security, and let's look at some of the basic things you need to know.
I can tell,
Go ahead.
just a comment, and I'm not taking tons of exams too in my life, not as many certs as you got, but
Yeah.
I can tell from the questions that this exam is not messing around. Like, you have to be really, you have to be fairly deep in Amazon stuff, AWS stuff anyway. But
Yeah.
also the questions, the way they're written, like you have to, this is definitely an endurance test more than
It is an endurance test, and I got to tell you something about, and I'm glad you mentioned this. There's two things about this exam I found interesting. One, in the past, where Amazon tried to trick me, they have a lot of tricky questions. I didn't see a lot of tricky questions on this one. It wasn't really trying to trick me, but it did have a lot of 2s and 3s, and we had to do those comparisons. You had to figure out which one was which.
yeah,
And
you gotta
you
pay attention to
and
this
you
stuff. Yeah.
had to have a real good understanding of your architect, which causes me to move this up, and which causes me to suggest that you take the associate level architect before you take this exam.
Yeah,
Because
it's, I mean, I
yeah,
can tell because
yeah,
there's just a lot of AWS specific architecture stuff. You have to have that in-depth,
yeah,
just
yeah,
VPC knowledge, and S3
yeah,
knowledge, and just how
absolutely,
everything's configured and stuff. And
yeah,
if I would just walk in there into that exam with security stuff in there, I think I'd bomb pretty easily.
yeah, yeah,
So this is
yeah.
really helpful. I appreciate
Oh,
that.
good, excellent. With that said, DDoS attack happens a lot. There's a number of services that you need to know for this particular area. Amazon Route 53, Amazon CloudWatch, which was covered, AWS WAF, we've covered, elastic load balancing. Why would I need an elastic load balancer for a DDoS attack?
Because you need to shift, you need to be able to scale to handle the volume that's coming in.
So yeah, I don't want my service to go down. So I immediately have to absorb the impact, right? And as I'm absorbing that impact, then I'm working on it and I'm figuring out what's wrong so I can start, handling that DDoS attack. So the first thing to do is to have that elastic load balancer, and then I'm getting alerts. Oh, guess what? This is filling up. You're really getting a drain here. You better take a look at this service and go work on it. And that's what you want to do. Amazon CloudFront, when you want to create infrastructure. from code, Amazon API, we talked about that. AWS Shield, we mentioned that, and Amazon EC2 auto scaling. Well, we've talked about that as well. That's part of the architecture. Real important that you know the difference between a security group and a NACL. And so, and some of the areas are subnet or instance, stateless or stateful, allow or deny, rule, process order, defense order, occurrence, rule, destination. So you'll see architectures like this where you're going to the internet, you have a router, you have your NACL on your subnet, and then you go down to the instance level, you have your security groups. Security groups are stateful. NACLs are stateless. You need to keep that straight. So many times I just set the inbound, or if I have to, the outbound security group. I don't set the inbound and outbound both. I just set one of them. But with a NACL, I need to set both. Okay. So a really good article on understanding these two is in the link below. I found this was excellent. And so we're going to go through it real quick so you guys can look at it.
Yeah, I looked for articles like that when I was studying for the exam, because that was when I was studying for the architect exam, because keeping that in your head is extremely important.
It's important, and there's questions on this, by the way, in the exam, and you typically have three levels, 3-tiered architecture, and you have to tell how you set the security groups and the NACLs for that architecture. And so security groups are tied to an instance, where NACLs are tied to a subnet. All right. Next one is security groups are stateful, while NACLs are stateless. When it comes to the rules, it turns out security group supports allow rules only. So if you say use a security group to deny, you see that all the time. You know that's wrong, because security groups don't deny. Security groups only allow. So that's always a tricky question. NACLs support allow and deny rules. The process of order, all rules in the security group are applied where it's kind of like a Venn diagram, where NACLs are actually ordered, and the newest one, the earliest one, it takes over. Okay. And defense and order network ACL, first layer of defense, where the security is the second layer of defense. And the current subnet can have only one NACL, where instances can have multiple security groups. So yeah, I mean, this is a really good article, and make sure you have that in your mind and how that works, because you'll have a few questions on security groups and NACLs. And they're actually not hard. If you know these, they're actually fairly easy. All right, type of things you'll see on this exam. Let me move this up just a little bit. Sorry about that. Are design edge security on AWS, design and implement a secure network infrastructure, troubleshoot a secure network infrastructure, design and implement a host-based security. I love this question here. I immediately just marked it and went on because it's a key word here. I look here and I know, oh, I'm dealing with headers. And so how do I change a header in AWS? Anybody know when I'm on the edge? How do I substitute or remove or do something to a header if I'm on a CloudFront edge? Anybody know?
Is that a oh, that's a Lambda edge.
Lambda Edge. So Lambda Edge is fairly new, I think. I'm not sure when the architecture came out, but allows you to grab a hold of the headers and do things. And so implement an AWS Lambda Edge origin response that inserts the required headers. All I just saw was the word Lambda Edge. I marked it and went on. I mean, this was a 5-second question. So if you know these architectures, and you know these keywords, you can just, you can and on a lot, about 20% of this exam, you can whale. And that's going to give you the mental edge to work with those 2 and 3 comparisons. Okay. So anyway, with that said, let's try this question here. An application is currently secured using network access control lists and security groups. Web servers are located in public subnets behind an application load balancer. Application servers are located in private subnets. How can edge security be enhanced to safeguard the Amazon EC2 instance against attack? All right. Choose 2. What are you going to do to safeguard against attack? Choose 2.
Well, I'd certainly have a WAF to provide.
Yeah, I would have a WAF too. That
DDoS.
sounds pretty good. Pretty good. There's one of these that you actually see a lot in a lot of the questions, and it's a technique that you need to do if you can do. I'll give you another question. It's architecture.
NAC gateways.
Nope, Yeah, and that gateway really has nothing to
How
do
to
with.
do
Yeah, I
B.
didn't think so.
It's B. You want to move the web servers, okay, to a private subnet. So if you've
Yeah.
created this three-tiered architecture, you got this application load balancer, you've got your web servers in public, you need to move them in the private and just let your ALB be there in front. Okay, that's so otherwise people can go into those EC2s. So you have your attack vectors a lot larger. So move them into the private, okay? So you're only facing with the ALB. Yeah, so that's what it is. It's actually B and C. All right, is that 2 questions for that one? Let me see. Yeah. Okay, all right, we're headed on here. And all right, fourth domain, identity and access management. Let's look at some of the key concepts. You really need to understand the policy elements of the config files, the effect, the action, the resource and conditions. And just give you a real quick example here, look, reading this config file. What does this mean? Well, you've got, if the condition equals EC2 region, US East 1, that means IAM policy that restricts the use of AWS resources to the use of region 1, okay? So it restricts you to that region. There's lots of ways they play games with these words. They have a deny, they have not string equals, and just a lot of, negatives and positives, so you need to learn how those go together. One thing you do need to keep in mind when you're working with this is that deny is king. All right. So if you have an allow rule and then you have a deny rule, deny takes over. Okay. With that said, design and implement a scalable authorization and authentication system to access AWS resources. Troubleshoot an authorization and authentication system to access AWS resources. Let's take a look at 2 questions in this area. All right. First question. A water utility company uses a number of Amazon EC2 instances to manage updates to a fleet of 2,000 Internet of Things IoT field service devices that monitor water quality. These devices each have unique access credentials. An operational safety policy requires that access to specific credentials is independently auditable. What is the most cost-effective way to manage the storage of credentials? All right, going to manage the storage of credentials. This also was a 5-second question.
It's not where I would normally put them, but that's what they say most cost effective.
I'm going to tell you to go with your gut instinct. If you wouldn't put it there, don't put it there. I mean, me and Charles are friends, by the way. We work together, so I could give him a hard time.
How about C?
See, I know secrets management. Okay, so you have a choice. All right, there's actually the choice is between A and C. Use AWS Systems Manager to store the credentials as secure string parameters. And here's the key word is secure string parameters. As soon as I saw that and I saw 2,000 Internet things, I went, boom, that's it. Secure by using AWS KMS key. So that, and then the other one was use secrets manager. I usually use this for like passwords of databases. Okay. And so if you got database like an RDS database, you're going to want to use the secrets manager. If you have this, like you got 2,000 Internet things, you want to use the secure string parameters. The reason being is with AWS Secrets Manager, you have the ability to, I believe, rotate keys. Or in this case, you're not rotating keys, you're just saving parameters. Okay. So you need to get the difference between those two straight. And yep, it was that one. I saw a fleet of 2,000 and I saw a secure string parameter and boom, that's it. So AWS Systems Manager is relatively new and it's relatively powerful and it's got lots of things in it. It's got patching in it. It's got the secure string in it. It's got the secrets manager in it. And it also gives you the ability to access the EC2 instance without using SSH, which is pretty good. You can just log in and access, but the agent needs to be installed on EC2. All right, so is that one? Let's do another one. Once again, that's another 5-second question for me. And the reason is, as soon as I saw mobile, guess which one of those I chose?
Cognito.
Right, as always, you see mobile, Cognito. And Cognito is basic, and what it is, it's Amazon's managed service for dealing with mobile federation. And so you just need to know, and if are you familiar with that architecture? And if you're going to take the associates, you'll learn that. Okay, so you'd know that right away. So yeah. So those two, so we're coming down to the very last one here. And We're coming on with, how are we doing on time? Good, we're coming in 4 minutes, so we're gonna hit it. Data protection, our very last one. And when it comes to data protection, you're gonna wanna know about Amazon RDS, DynamoDB. I didn't see questions on either one of these, but maybe I did. I think I did see 1 or 2 references to these in multiples. AWS Secrets Manager needs to know about that. We just covered that. Amazon Glacier and Amazon S3 Glacier Vault. There's always this question that you see all over the exams. And the question for Glacier Vault is this. Somebody has initiated a Glacier Vault. And 12 hours later, they notice there's a typo. Now, if you understand Glacier Vault, after 24 hours, once it goes, you can't undo it. So if there's a spelling error and 24 hours has passed, then it's stuck. You can't undo it. So they say, and 12 hours have passed, they recognize that there's a spelling error. What should you do? What do you think you should do?
Fix the typo.
You just cancel it. You cancel the vault. Say, fix the typo and reinitiate it. That's that's the answer. You're right. Fix the typo. Cancel it because you got 24 hours, right? You only got 12, and you'll see this on a lot, not just exam, but other exams as well. Grants and policies, know those well. So for this particular one, data protection, you want to design and implement key management, troubleshoot key management, and design and implement data encryption solution for data at rest and in transit. We've seen one of those already. Let's handle one of these questions. You'll see a question similar to this exam, plus potentially. A security engineer who was retrieving an AWS management service, AWS KMS key policy, found this statement in each key policy in the AWS account. What does it do? All right. All right. And look at this. The principal is ARN, AWS, IAM, 11111, 2222, 3333, colon root. What do you think? What does it do?
It looks like it allows the root user to use anything in KW, any KMS action against any resource.
I know it looks like that. And that was my first answer to this question. But what it does is,
You got answers down below. Oh, gee.
it
Let me
allows,
look at those.
it allows root users and below, believe it or not. So the answer to this particular question is only principals from the account that have the IAM policy applied that grants access to this key to use the key. So it is principals in the account, root user and below. Wow, I didn't know that. All right, with that said, we're coming in on time. Let me see if I can pull one more out that might be interesting. Let's try this. This is my favorite one. A developer who is following AWS best practices for secure code development requires an application to encrypt sensitive data to be stored at rest locally in the application. Using AWS KMS, what is the simplest and most secure way to decrypt this data when required? All right. A, B, C, or D. Take a look at those. This is my favorite one. And we are going to go over about 5 minutes today, but we're not much longer. And then I'll hang out for questions.
About A.
Which one did you say?
A.
A would not be the answer.
Good.
Request to provide stored unencrypted data key, and then you actually want the key encrypted. So
I like D myself.
and you are correct. Store the data encrypted and store the encrypted data key alongside the encrypted data. Use the decrypt API to retrieve the data key to decrypt the data. So it's retrieved, it's decrypted, and you use it to decrypt the data. So you actually store it with the data. Pretty cool, huh? I love that. I love that one.
This
And so,
KMS only handles maximum of 4096 bytes, right?
that's absolutely true. Thank you for bringing that up. You're for the data key. When you go beyond 4, you need the data key to encrypt and decrypt. So one thing you need to be familiar with, and the Udemy courses that we have go through this in detail on how all this data is encrypted and decrypted. Well, if you go through the rest of the slide, you're going to see in the appendix we have by Sandra. He actually goes through the Amazon questions. And then I actually put a practice exam in there as well. And you can go through the practice exam and see more questions like this that might be on the exam.
Neat.
There's a lot of them, so I put a lot of them in there. 185 slides, so good. And that concludes my presentation on the security exam. Good luck. It's a good one. I mean, it's a good one to have. I learned a tremendous amount when I took it. I mean, I took it 3 years ago, and boy, have things changed, and there was a lot I had to learn to pass this. So, but like I said, I flew through it. But I used a lot of these techniques I talked about in this exam, and you'll pick up your own techniques. And when you do, just share them with us. I will have to have a disclaimer. If you use something I told you and it didn't work, I'm sorry. But I think that I'm getting pretty good at taking these exams, so I'm feeling pretty confident a lot of this stuff will work real well for you.